slave on the United Plantations of America. Now let us discuss slavery, not that horrendous period in American history that has mistakenly been declared over, never to return again. However, let us discuss the modern day slavery of the American citizens. Most of us are just slaves to the whims of the system and the false god of greed that America so gladly served. This is why I mention slavery, because most of Americans' minds have been enslaved by the deceptive practices of our society. We have been tricked into serving Lucifer. I have always been taught that what you sow, that also shall you reap. My grandmother would say it this way: watch out what you do to others, because it just might come back and be done to you. However, I wonder how we will react when we finally wake up and take the blinders off and realize that we are just slaves on the United Plantations of America. Everything that we have, we actually do not own. The bank, finance company, or someone else owns it. We are just making payments. For every dollar we produce, we receive only 0.005% of 1% of the profits. Nevertheless, the bosses or owner of the company receives massive bonuses and compensation. If we do not pay our taxes or do something the system disagrees with, we are bound in chains, beaten, and the little that we do have is taken away. Don't get me wrong, I love life here in America, but the more I think about it, this sounds like the life of a slave to me. I do not mean to be the prophet of doom and gloom. However, every watchman has a duty to do. If the watchman is at his post when danger comes, the watchman's job is to issue out a warning. However, if life cares and worries about what people will think about the message takes the watchman's attention away to the point that from his job he quickly strays, then danger comes calling upon the people, and their blood will be on the watchman's hands. Without a sincere watchman, what will America do? This is why I must tell things as they are. Most of the prophets of the Old Testament never brought good news to the Israelites. Still, they were charged by God to deliver the news. The gospel is not always good news, but good news is always gospel. Now, when we apply the scriptures to the day in which we currently exist, we realize that this very message is for America and all those of the world that have allowed themselves to be Americanized. Like the children of Israel, we have forsaken the teachings of God that has brought us from the nothingness of servitude to the prominence we hold today. Yet in our travel down the slippery road to the American dream, like the Israelites, we chased after every god that we deemed we were big enough to chase after. We neglected serving each other and concentrating on serving only our selfish whims and desires. We worship the creature instead of the creator. Man burned with the unnatural affection for men and women for women. Therefore, God had no choice but to turn our country over to a reprobate mind. This is where America is now. America has traded the God-given blessings of love and unity for racial separation, greed, and corruption. Therefore, America now stands on the verge of annihilation by God. Moreover, in our misguided society, the truth is often considered provocative because Everyone feels it should remain the unspoken truth. However, there is nothing that is provocative concerning these truthful remarks. People that tend to forget their history is doomed to repeat it. Most of the civilized world has suffered the horrors of slavery. However, this did not and has not stopped us from continuing to experience the sad effects of it. For example, the lessons learned from the numerous wars and conflicts fought has never been applied. Therefore, we continue to war and kill each other. For example, the lessons of the interconnectivity of our societies have been continually taught to us through nature, science, and life experience. We know for a fact that our world is indispensably interconnected. Still, we fail to realize that if my neighbor hurts, then because we are connected, I will eventually hurt because of his condition. Sadly, America has forgotten the examples of the Old Testament that vividly showed us how God will do this nation if we, like Israel, forsook our relationship with Him. Still, we printed in God, we trust on our money, and we trusted in everything other than God. No wonder America is coming apart at the seams. Again, America needs to wake up and learn from the mistakes of history past before we destroy our future. I am taking great liberty at revealing that most of us in America are actually slaves to the privileged few. I can imagine what slavery was like because I listened to the vivid stories of my grandfather's childhood growing up on the cotton plantations of rural Alabama. I can still hear the vivid and detailed stories that were displayed by the bullwhip scars on his back. I can because I grew up in the cotton fields and dairy farms of Perry County, Alabama, and witnessed the injustices of Caucasian lynch mobs hanging our dark-skinned neighbors from oak trees. I can because I remember I was barely born when in Selma members of my family were beaten for wanting to vote. See, I attended the last of all black schools in Perry County. However, I bet most of you have never walked a mile in a slave's shoes. Well, I have. For more than 14 years, I walked in his shoes as I watched my grandfather and family slave on the dairy farm for only $250 a month. I lived at this time on the Lakeland Farms plantation in rural Perry County. I remember my grandfather, my grandmother, my great uncle, 3 uncles, 2 aunts, 4 first cousin, brother and sister working hard 16 hours a day on a job that they could not quit even if another one was found. Someone once said, if you can quit a job, you're not a slave. My grandfather would say that they were a fool for saying that. I know that the world in which I live is not the American dreamed of by our forefathers. It is an America where conglomerates control society. It has become an America where Walmart can acquire your property that you and your family lived on for centuries without paying you fair market value. It has become an America where Chrysler, GM, and Wall Street can receive billions from the American taxpayers so they can continue to foreclose on the American taxpayer. America has become a country where Exxon and other oil companies send our troops to fight an unjust war just so the oil companies can get richer. In turn, America has become a country where the overly wealthy gas company raised the gas prices, where doctors are allowed to play God, get Americans hooked on all kind of man-made drugs, then deny treatment to those in need because of their inability to pay. I'm not saying that all these small business persons do not deserve the benefits they reap from the American workers' labor. I will gladly stand up for their right to reap these benefits. Rather, the ones I mention as the privileged few are the never-seen owners of the mega conglomerates that infects the economic landscape of our country. These corporations neglect the need to feed the oxen that tread the grain. They continue to reap the benefits of our hard labor. Then, while we struggle to put food on our tables, they enjoy the spoils of their ill-gotten luxury. In the land where all men are thought to be created equal, where's the fairness in this action? Where's the fairness in working all day just to come home and barely being able to survive and take care of your family from the scraps they gave you from the master's table? Yes, it is time for a real minimum wage increase. Instead of the government telling privileged corporate America how much to pay their slaves, the slaves should revolt and tell corporate privileged America how much money from our labor we will allow them to keep. Let us take off the shackles of slavery to the modern American economic mindset that regulates our pay to the whim of the privileged few. Let us stand up and tell the corporate masters how much they should pay us for our labor instead of just accepting anything they will give us. When will we realize the most valuable resource in America is the American worker? We have the power because we outnumber the privileged elite. Remember, we literally outnumber them 100 to 1. In reality, the demand for the goods produced provides the jobs. However, the conglomerates are just the useless middlemen that get in the way. See, capitalism is just idolatry in disguise. Because of our capitalistic mindset, we now deem it as acceptable to treat the worker or the laborer with contempt and disrespect. The reason for this is the call of capitalism is to capitalize or take advantage of the need of your brother and sister. Instead of being our brothers and sisters' keepers, capitalism has turned us into cannibalistic sheep feeding on other sheep. We are now a nation overcome with mad human disease. Our conglomerates that hire the people are the same ones that rule the country. When was the last time that the American citizens were represented by its lobbyists before Congress? Oh, I forgot. Congress is the American people lobbyists, yet they pander to the whims of the privileged few that control these giant conglomerates that are too big to fail. Nevertheless, this nation was started as a government for the people and by the people. Yet Microsoft, Exxon, Bank of America, among a long list of others, actually has the power to make the laws. So when these conglomerates that we deem too important to fail, and so when these conglomerates that we deem too important to fail, and that we gladly bow down to servitude to fail, it caused the American economy to falter as well. Slavery is when the minority rules the majority by force or coercion. because of poverty or economic need. It is also scripturally called greed, and greed is called sin, not by our founding fathers, rather by God. This is something that we need to return to. We need to return to living the truth we claim to believe. If I'm a child of God and my brothers and sisters in need, what good does it do for me to profit off their need to feed my greed? Should I not be considered a monster when I fight to keep the downtrodden down? Should I not be considered a monster when I refuse to pay the worker rightly from the profits their labors brings around? Do I realize I risk forsaking and forfeiting my heavenly crown? When the economy finishes disappearing, and after inflation reaches triple digits due to the conglomerates fleecing the American taxpayer, life really will be harder for each of us that has become dependent upon these conglomerates. I can imagine how difficult it will be survived. Nevertheless, in 10 years, when none of them exist because their greed has bankrupted America, then we will realize that God is still real, and He is the only one too big to fail. Therefore, I thank God for the opportunity to voluntarily work for 0.005% of 1% of the realized profits from my efforts. I thank God for having to pay for something like water, gas, and air, although He gave it to us for free. Yes, I thank God every day that I am privileged to live in a country where everyone that is not rich is actually a slave. As always, may God always bless each of us. Pastor Reginald Levi Walker.